Here's another real book tune where more is in the music than meets the eye on the page. I'm Ron Drotos, and welcome to our journey through the real book, installment number 151. This is about the 3-year mark, doing one a week, and it's going to take 8 years to get through the whole book. So it's my project, hopefully yours too, or maybe you're just looking at certain tunes. Whatever it is, thanks for joining me here so we can explore these things together. Please leave a comment if you know something about the tune that I don't mention, or whatever. Just check in. It's nice to inspire each other like this. So this is Hot Toddy. It's not a big jam session tune. It's not one that you're going to say, hey, let's play Hot Toddy, 1, 2, and everybody plays it like Autumn Leaves or something. It's not one of those tunes. But it's, I actually don't know why it's in the new edition of the Real Book by Hal Leonard. It wasn't in the original, but we're going through this in order, and I'm using it as a chance to learn new things too. And it's well worth exploring because it's fascinating when you get into it a little bit. First of all, the tune is unusual in that it has sort of a reverse 2/5 in the sheet music here, the lead sheet. So instead of having in the key of F, instead of having G minor to C, like we practice thousands and millions of times, 2/5s, it has a 5/2. It has, and it's actually a 6 chord, C6. It's a G minor. So the interesting thing is when you look at it on the page here, it has, it sounds like it's in the key of C at first. We don't know it's in F, but it sounds like it's in C with a 1 chord in C to a minor 5. We don't know yet that it's really 5/1, 5/2 in F. So it sounds like a Mixolydian feeling, like a, like Latin music, or even sort of old, like Renaissance music. Very modal like that. It has that feeling. It's interesting. And then it goes through various keys with that, and eventually comes back to F. So that's the first thing. Little unusual, but it's written in 1953 by Ralph Flanagan, and he recorded it. It was also recorded by Ted Heath, who was an English band leader. And again, this is the 50s, early 50s. It's right before rock and roll. And it all ties together because this is not even though jazz in the 30s and 40s was very riff-oriented a lot of times, in the mood, catchy, with a little bit of a backbeat sometimes on 2 and 4, we can see that as a predecessor to rock and roll, and not that different than some early rock and roll that might have had swing 8 notes. And I saw an interview with Chuck Berry once, rock and roller from the 50s, who credited Benny Goodman as being a big influence. He said he wanted to capture that energy that Benny Goodman's band had. So, the early rock and rollers grew up with big band jazz. And in England, 1953, there was a big jazz scene at that time, also traditional jazz, like early Dixieland, New Orleans, but big band jazz. Paul McCartney from the Beatles, his father led a jazz band at times, playing trumpet, and he also played piano. The Rolling Stones have family members that played jazz, and they grew up listening to this music. It's one reason why you can occasionally see a Stones video where they sort of go into a little jazzy thing or a modal, and they're at home with it because they grew up with that music when they were teenagers. They heard it all around them. This would have been a song that was on the radio at that time, and it was covered by country musicians like Chet Atkins. You would have heard this song. This is a little before my time. I was born in 64, but if you were around in 53 or late 50s even, you would have heard cover versions of this a lot. It was all around. It was probably done at weddings and dances and all that. It's very catchy, and in that sense, we can see it kind of as a predecessor of rock and roll. And actually, the Ted Heath version and some of the other, they don't just start with a walking bass. They might get there eventually, but it's got this, like with the baritone sax. Boom, 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 boom. It's got a very much riff-oriented thing that would not have been out of place in an early rock and roll thing. When I played the show Smokey Joe's Cafe on Broadway in the 90s, that was Lieber and Stoller's music, all the Elvis stuff, also Spanish Harlem, Platters, Drifters, all that music on Broadway was in the show. There was a lot of sax riffs like that. Even though this is, quote, jazz, there's a cross-pollination between riff-oriented jazz in the early 50s, would have been called also R&B at that time, and rock and roll. There's a area in the middle where they all meet, and centered around the blues and swing rhythms. So a couple mysteries here, though. If I looked at the original sheet music, the Ralph Flanagan, at least what I found, and it's in a different key. Instead of going instead of an F, it was it's in C, and it starts not with a 5-2 like I explained before, but with a 2-5. So in this key, by analogy, it would be a G minor to C. That's in the original sheet music, but maybe they base this on a recording or whatever. I'm going to start with these chords, and I think I might throw in a couple 2-5s or maybe some substitute chords just to see where it takes me. There's also a wonderful version by Gene Harris, the bluesy jazz pianist of that time, who played it very slow. With all these bluesy licks. Like he did. Wonderful version there. I think what I'm going to do is what we've sort of been trying throughout this video series. I'm encouraging you to do too. Sort of learn those versions, but then make it your own and draw from them. And I think since I can't really describe if I want that bouncy groove, like I was playing at a dance, or the slow blues, or somewhere in between, maybe start with a walking bass, because they all do walking bass eventually. I think what I'm going to do, and Gene Harris doesn't do the 5-2, he does the 2-5. Just starts with the 2 chord and then the 5. I think I'm going to start with sound, with a chord voicing, and just see where that takes me. And start out of tempo, and then let the groove kind of suggest itself, and maybe draw on all those different things. All right. You know, a lot of that took me by surprise. Like I said at the beginning, I didn't really know. I just started with that sort of clustery, kind of evocative voicing, maybe thinking a little Gil Evans there with his arranging and these unusual evocative chords. And then, as you could hear, that sort of relaxed groove wasn't really as slow as the Gene Harris, had a little bit of all those different versions that I talked about at the beginning of the video. And a lot of passing chords. You know, if it's a 2/5, you could go up to the 3, the 4, you know, tritone substitutions. I don't know if you noticed, but I played the F7 down to the F a lot. And, you know, fun. Block chords with sometimes drop 2 voicings. And sort of make them modal at the same time. Sometimes I just started playing voicings that really weren't predetermined, that I've never practiced. Just sort of see where the voice leading takes you. That's fun. The fun part about learning a tune, particularly one that's not really that challenging, has a lot of repetition, a lot of chords we've played before. You can really use it in a personal way that contains elements of that little swing thing here, that recording, or the bluesy, or a ballad you heard somewhere else. You know, hot toddy. Didn't even mention the title. It's a drink, right? Like tea with some sort of alcohol in it, something comforting. I think that's where it's coming from. Just something comforting that you could sit home and drink on you know, when it's cold outside, maybe in front of a fireplace or something like that. So thanks for being here. If you're interested in Skype lessons or my video course at keyboardimprov.com, happy to help you any way I can. The main thing is that you stay inspired, motivated, and if this video is helping you with that, then I'm very happy. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time with one of my other favorite composers besides Gil Evans, who I mentioned, is Wayne Shorter, and House of Jade. See you then.